Testing, testing. Hello, friends. Welcome to my show, Troubling Rants. On this show, I'll be delving into all the social engineering movements that have been going on in the past and the ones that are currently in front of us today. In order to do that, I feel like I needed to delve back a little bit more into history. So with this show, I'm going to touch upon topics such as World War II, some of the mysterious occultic things behind Adolf Hitler, the mystery behind Anne Frank, the Black Lives Matter movement. We'll be getting into all these things on this show, maybe telling you some things that you haven't heard before. But in this episode, I would like to focus on Plato and the mystery schools. While I was reading The Republic, a lot of things kind of stuck out to me, certain phrases, certain words. I just figured I'd kind of collect them and just see what everybody else felt about them. So let's get into it. The first quote: "With a view to concealment, we will establish secret brotherhoods and political clubs." This one was just kind of weird because I'm not one of those Illuminati confirmed people, but when you have the father of academia in his book stating that we need a secret society that kind of governs over political bodies, I just think that's kind of weird, you know, and I wonder if it has extended on to this day. The next quote that I'm going to read kind of resonates with the cancel culture that's currently going on. Just shows that there's nothing new under the sun. "The first thing will be to establish a censorship of the writers of fiction, and let the censors receive any tale of fiction which is good, and reject the bad. And we will desire mothers and nurses to tell their children the authorized ones only. Let them fashion the mind with such tales even more fondly than they would mold the body with their hands. But most of those which are now in use must be discarded." And the next quote I'm going to read goes with the mythology of Cronus. I'm not too sure about Cronus, but I know that he was intimidated by his children, that they would usurp his power, so he ate all of his children. And he ended up being deified as Saturn in the Roman mythology. And we'll get into it on a different episode, but it seems to be that the god Yahweh may have some correlation with Saturn or Cronus. But here's the quote: "The doings of Cronus and the sufferings which in turn his son inflicted upon him, even if they were true, ought certainly not to be lightly told to young and thoughtless persons. If possible, they had better be buried in silence. But if there is an absolute necessity for their mention, a chosen few might hear them in a mystery, and they should sacrifice not a common Eleusinian pig, but some huge and unprocurable victim. And then the members of the hearers will be very few indeed. They are stories not to be repeated in our state." In the next quote: "The founders of a state ought to know the general forms in which poets should cast their tales, and the limits which must be observed by them, but to make the tales is not their business." Pretty much sounds like the music industry these days, right? And the next quote that I'll be reading kind of reminded me of like all the army propaganda videos we saw growing up around 9/11, you know, a little bit before that. The motherland, that whole concept. "They are to be told that their youth was a dream, and the education and training they received from us in appearance only. In reality, during all that time they were being formed and fed in the womb of the earth. When they were completed, the earth, their mother, sent them up, and so their country, being their mother and also their nurse. They are to regard as children of the earth and their own brothers." This next quote I wrote down in my notes: "On democratic governments and ancient social justice warriors / Bernie bros. Freedom creates rather more drones in the democratic than there were in the oligarchical state. And in the democracy, they are certainly more intensified. The rich are the most squeezable persons and yield the largest amount of honey to the drones. The wealthy class and the drones feed upon them." So all our modern-day Antifa socialists, according to Plato, you're drones. And the next quote that I'll be reading is from Manly Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, a book I highly recommend. "Plato traveled widely and was initiated by the Egyptians into the profundities of Hermetic philosophy." That was a huge thing that got to me, because I wasn't aware of all these mystery schools, and I certainly didn't know that the guy who came up with the Pythagorean theorem theorem was initiated into these mystery schools and traveled to Africa and Egypt, and this is just what kind of turned me into these things. Well, there you have it. That is my first episode, Plato and the Mystery Schools. I hope next time you hear about philosophy, you give it a chance, just because you never know what you might find out. On the next episode, I'll be getting into Mao Zedong and the Black Lives Matter movement.